Hi, in this video we'll be looking at the features provided by RapidFTR. But before we do that, let's look at how one would interact with RapidFTR. So essentially it would be either through the Android application on your phone, through the web application in your browser, through the API via another application, and also could be through another RapidFTR server trying to sync with your own RapidFTR server. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to concentrate only on the Android app and the web application, mostly because the API is covered in a separate video which deals with exporting data, and interactions with the server also covered in another video dealing with server-to-server sync. So the principle around RapidFTR is to help with unifying a child with his or her parents or guardian. Now, the first step into doing this is actually knowing who the child is. So we need to register the child. So via the web application, you get the ability to register a child, and this includes details like the name, the other personal details, who the parents were, who the guardian was, where they used to live, contact details if possible, and of course photos and audio, just to increase on the uniqueness of the identity of that record. So via the web application, you can upload photos and audio, but just one note here is you can only ever upload one audio clip. So this also applies to the mobile application, where you can only record one audio clip as well. The next bit is the changelog. The changelog is pretty much a history of changes relating to any child record. So if you change a child's name from Greg to Matthew, so that will be indicated in the child record, on the changelog, sorry. So one entry in the changelog would have the date and time of the change, would have what was changed. So in this case, it would say Greg, name changed from Greg to Matthew. It would tell which user changed it and from what organization that user comes from. And this also works out well as a good way to have a sort of audit trail for changes to a record. The next bit is the export. Now this is a slightly larger feature, which is also covered in a separate video which deals with data export, but essentially this covers a need where you would have the requirement to perhaps remove data from RapidFTR and use it for legitimate purposes elsewhere. In that case, you then use the export feature and export some records out of RapidFTR and then use them as you see fit for that particular purpose. The next bit is then the advanced search. This is pretty much in the event your database grows nice and big and you need to find a few records quickly. This gives you the ability to look for records based on a multitude of criteria. So for example, if I'm looking for a child called Greg, there could be multiple Gregs, and then I could specify between which dates that child was registered in RapidFTR. I could then specify what the mother's name was or the father's name was, if that's if I sort of have that information on hand. And then through the advanced search, I can pull that record instantly without having to dive through the entire list on the children's page. And of course, because RapidFTR will potentially be deployed in multiple places, speaking multiple languages, there is a provision for multi-language support. At the moment, only 5 languages are supported. This is inclusive of English, but in the future, more languages will be added as more features get piled on. So this set of features is pretty much what most users in RapidFTR will be using throughout the existence of that particular instance. However, we've missed the one side. The one side is, well, what happens on the administrator side of things? So what does the administrator do during the deployment of RapidFTR, or while it's running as well? So first bit is managing the forms. Now, when I speak of forms, I'm referring to the same forms users fill in when they're registering a child. So the form where you'll find the child's basic identity, their photos and audio, this is what I'm talking of. And what this gives you the ability to do is to actually change those forms. So I could change a field like name and then change it to child's name, or add new fields as I see fit or as the situation requires. This is something you won't do on a daily basis, but it's something you do maybe once or twice. So once while you're deploying RapidFTR, and then maybe sometime in the middle of RapidFTR running, you see a need to just add a new field for a specific purpose, and then you'd also make that change. So it's still something you'll be doing quite often. The next one is more or less another expected one, is managing the users of RapidFTR. So this covers users of both the web and Android application, because if you get access to either the web application or the Android application by an administrator registering you and giving you a username and password, you'd have access to both. I've just highlighted two things. So as part of managing users, you'll also be able to manage roles. So roles contain a set of permissions which grant a user particular sets of functionality or access to particular sets of functionality. So as part of creating users, you'll also be managing the roles as well. And of course, a handy feature is disabling users. So if for whatever reason a user is deemed as not fit to use RapidFTR, you can actually disable that user and deny them access to the system. The next bit is sort of managing devices. I'm just going to quickly zip over the first one. Servers is pretty much referring to servers that sync with your particular server running RapidFTR, and this is covered as well in the server-to-server sync video. So I'll just quickly zip over to the next bit where we have mobile phones. So every time a phone accesses the RapidFTR server, the IMEI number is taken note of. So assuming I connect with my phone, an IMEI number of, let's say, 789, I mean they're longer than this, but this is just an example, is recorded. The reason for that is we may have a rogue user trying to access RapidFTR through a particular phone, and we may not necessarily know what their particular user account is, so we can't use this feature to disable them. But then once we know that those changes are coming from a particular phone 78943, we can then go ahead and disable that phone and deny it access. So even though it's accessing RapidFTR with a legitimate user account, that user, because they're using this particular phone, will always fail to connect to RapidFTR. This is just another added security feature that we have to just make sure our data stays secure. Just moving on here. Oops, there we go. Next bit, reports. At the moment, they're not so many reports, but there is a report that gives you aggregated information about the data you have in RapidFTR. This runs once every week. It's automated, and you'll be able to pick up those reports once a week. So you can't execute the run, but the report run will sort of happen on its own. And this just gives you details like how many people, how many records you made in a specific period, and how were those records split by gender, and so on and so forth. This is a feature that will of course be added to in future iterations of RapidFTR. And then the last bit is to do with system settings. So the system settings cover only your server of RapidFTR. I just want to take note of two things. So in system settings, we kind of have things like changing the language, changing highlight fields. But the two ones I wanted to point out were server-to-server sync accounts and export logs. So server-to-server sync accounts are pretty much user accounts that you would use to grant another server access to your server for RapidFTR. So these accounts are independent of the ones you would have when you're managing users up here. This is why they're sort of separated from the general managed users area. The next bit is export logs. So I talked about exporting data out of RapidFTR and this particular uses you might have for it. However, in many cases you'd want to keep track of who's exporting what, because I could export the entire database of RapidFTR, but not for purposes that are legitimate for RapidFTR. So what the export logs do is give you the ability to track who is using the export feature in RapidFTR, and again, this is just another layer of audit that you'd use if you want to just keep track of things. Essentially, because this is one of the ways people can easily steal data from RapidFTR. So let's move on to the Android application. So the Android application has more or less the same features as the web application with a few minor changes. So obviously we get access to registering records, and it's more or less the same thing. You take the child details as well as the multimedia. Change here is, instead of uploading photos and audio, you are actually taking the photos with the camera on the phone, as well as recording the audio clip with the mic on the phone. So you're not uploading anything, you're just literally taking the photos and audio on the fly. The next bit is the basic search, which, as opposed to giving you multiple criteria as you'd have in the advanced feature in the web application, you can only search on the mobile phone by either name or ID of the record. So that's all you get in the basic search. Just simply because there isn't that much space to play with on the phone, so it's easier to make things nice and simple. Now, of course, a feature that comes with the phone is the ability to sync your data across to a RapidFTR server once you get to know the URL. And as well as, just as the web application, this has multi-language support, and it's the same 5 languages as the web application. The only difference is if I select, let's assume I select to use French on the web application, I could select to use English on the Android application. So the two settings are independent of each other. That's just something to take note of. So you want get a good sync between the Android device and the web application. And then the last handy bit here is working offline. So as opposed to a web application, in the web application you need to have consistent connection to the server to work. However, with a phone, once you lose connection to the server, you can carry on doing pretty much everything else you were doing before, with the exception of syncing data. This is the only thing you lose, but everything else, registering, searching, and using all the other features will be available to you. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This covers the Android features as well as the web features provided by RapidFTR. Thanks for watching.